How's that? Is that better? Do you guys prefer it with sound? You didn't realize this was a lip reading masterclass. That's what this was all about. So, all right. I am, this is a Q&A session. Most of you joined us from the masterclass that we did last week. And if you didn't, I know that, some additional people just showed up for the Q&A. You will get a copy of the recorded masterclass so that you can watch that and get up to speed. I am predominantly operating from questions that were sent in. If I run out of those, which I think I will see. But I am, no, because quite a these I've already answered. So if you have additional questions about speaking, storytelling, building a speaking business, how to get booked, how to brand yourself, anything at all about speaking, then please go ahead and drop them in the chat, and we'll get to those as well. We should be able to get to everybody's questions today. So, and then, yeah, the TED Talk versus singing question, that's really straightforward to me. I'm absolutely going to do the TED Talk over the singing. That's just the way it's going to be. I think you'll all be grateful about that. I'm a big fan of Bryan Adams, and I've been to a number of his concerts, and he routinely will pull someone right out of the audience and do a duet with them right live during the concert. So I'm not sure, Lucas, if that's less thrilling than doing a TED Talk. I'm going to go with more thrilling in that particular case. So, all right, let's see here. And I will, funny enough, I will address that one little idea about the difference between, for me, speaking and singing. And that is that I think singing is incredibly valuable and really fun. And it's about making people feel good right now. Whereas the way I look at speaking is that speaking is about empowering and inspiring people to feel good for a long time. That's sort of the difference for me. And that's how I justify my not singing, because the truth is I'm just not comfortable with it. All right. So that's a little useless preamble. And now we'll jump into actual Q&A. A couple little reminders I have for you is, let's see here. Some of you, I don't think, got the information, and I'm posting it right here, but I know some of you have had like follow-up questions about the Speaking Academy. That's not what this call is for, but I've posted a link in here so that if you would like to book a discovery call just to explore how you might use speaking in your life, how you might use it in your profession, you can book a call, and you can use the link that I just posted there to do that. And then there are some of you who are actually planning to come out to the Speaking Academy and haven't registered yet. I think you guys still have a couple of hours left on the offers that we made you during the masterclass, and the URL for that is now also in the chat. So that's the kind of housekeeping items I wanted to address. And now in terms of today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the questions that we collected from you guys prior, from during and after the last masterclass. And then once I've gotten through those, then I'll jump in and take any live questions that you guys might have. Leno, I don't know if your question was included. Let me see.
Yes, it was. We did collect it.
Okay, good. Got it. All right, so I'm going to start. I have a question here from Dia. And do the techniques you teach help with stage anxiety for singers and to get more attention and impact? I'm very anxious before going on the stage before singing. Then it gets much better when I actually perform. But before that, I'm very worried. I would like to be fearless. Can we use the concept of storytelling? Also, can we use the concept of storytelling during singing? The answer is a qualified yes and an absolute yes. And so what I mean by the qualified yes is when you're asking, like, can I use the strategies that we use in the Speaking Academy to overcome your nervousness? Yes, you can. Can I speak to that from a point of like congruence, as in, do I use those strategies and go out and sing? No. So I don't want to try to pretend that I'm from experience telling you that this will help with singing, but I logically know that it will. And I've had many clients tell me that it will. I just don't want to pretend that I'm going out there and using it to go and sing, because I just don't do that. But if you think about the techniques that we do, that we talked about on the call last week, or on the masterclass, or when we think about more even in detail, the exercises and the processes that we go through during the Speaking Academy, yes, absolutely, they will help with any type of stage fright, whether it's acting, which I can definitely speak to, whether it's speaking, or whether it's singing. So the answer to that is yes. And can we use storytelling in singing? Absolutely. I mean, many songs are actually stories. And if you think about, I mean, The Devil Went Down to Georgia. If you could read the lyrics of that, and it's basically a story. And so, storytelling can absolutely be done in song. Where it gets a little bit difficult these days is that pop music and sort of really heavy rock music, it's sometimes hard to hear the lyrics, and therefore the story can be a little bit lost. But there are many types of music that involve specifically storytelling. So the answer to that is yes. Dia, thank you. Great question. Chris, I think. Chris, how to memorize in a natural way a 1-hour speech, and how to tell a non-dramatic way personal stories. Okay, I'm going to try and rephrase these questions. So you're asking how to memorize a 1-hour speech. Okay, I've got that. And then how to tell non-dramatic personal stories. Chris, are you on with us now? I don't know. I don't see. All right. So guess you're watching on recording. And the first thing is that the best way that I can suggest to you to memorize a speech is never, ever try to memorize one again. It just isn't effective. It's stressful, and it creates the wrong energy. And people can always tell when somebody's delivering a memorized speech. There is a professional speaker who does very well, by the way, and I'm not suggesting that it can't work. It's not my style. I don't agree with it. But there's a professional speaker. I did an event with him last year, and he delivers one of the best keynote talks I've ever seen. It's funny. It's powerful. It's got a great message. But when you poll the audience afterward, when you ask the audience what's going on, what you'll hear from them is that there was a lack of sincerity. And that you'll hear from the audience that they didn't feel connected. And thank you, Joanne. You'll hear from them that they didn't feel really connected. And the reason being is that his talk is clinically perfect. He's memorized it. And if you saw it on Monday and then you saw it again on Tuesday, it would be exactly the same. He would have the exact same posture, same facial expressions, same stage positioning, same words, same intonation, same pauses. It's basically a one-man show rather than a keynote presentation. And that's the risk you run when you memorize. So I'm not a big fan of memorizing. All I would ask you to memorize is the order in which you're telling the story. Now, I'm going to give you the light version of this answer, but I want you to know that in the S3 product that you guys were offered when you registered for the masterclass, I think it's you guys were given an incredible discount on it. It's like $97 or something. In that S3 product, and of course at the Speaking Academy, we go into a lot more detail about this, but I want to give you a surface level of it right now. The metaphor I would use is that if we hired the Rolling Stones, or Bryan Adams for that matter, to come and do a concert for us this afternoon, he wouldn't need to practice. They wouldn't need to practice. They wouldn't need to memorize the concert. All they would have to do is remember the order in which they were going to sing the songs. Same thing for you. Once you know which 4 stories you're going to tell, you shouldn't need to memorize them because they're your stories. You should be remembering them. And so as a consequence, all that you really need to be doing is maybe at best memorizing the order in which you're going to tell the stories. That's all. You don't need to memorize the stories. And so I use mind maps. We call them speech maps to make that happen. And in essence, what happens is I'm really clear that I'm going to tell this story to make this point. And I'm going to tell this story to make this point. And so at any point in time in my presentation, I can shorten my presentation by removing a story. I can lengthen my presentation by adding a story in. I can also shorten or lengthen the entire presentation by telling longer or shorter versions of the existing stories. And none of that requires memorization. So I hope that answers your question. I'm not really sure what the second part of the question means specifically. I mean, you're asking how to tell non-dramatic way personal stories. The best way I can tell you, the best way I can answer this is like this. People often say, well, Eric, you say that it all should be done with storytelling because emotions are only anchored in, or emotions are the glue that anchor in the memories. And, you say everything, but I just have to present numbers to the board. Right? I just have to present the numbers to the board. How can I? And I go, well, okay, I want you to consider the difference between good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board, You will recall that last quarter we projected 16% growth for the next quarter, and now that the quarter's finished, I can tell you that we've achieved 14% growth. Right? Like that's reporting. But a story might go like this. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, you may recall that when we were here last quarter, we projected 16% growth, which frankly, I thought was optimistic. I didn't really feel that we were being realistic about those projections. So I must say that this morning, when I was waiting for the numbers from the accounting team, I had some apprehension about myself, and the envelope came and I tore it open. And I was really shocked to find that instead of getting 16%, we actually got 17%. So you see what I've done is I've just told it like a story. So Chris, I don't know if that answers your question. And since you're not here live, I can't dig in deeper with you, but I hope that gives you something to build on. So thank you for sending that in. Connie, when you are starting out, Connie says, when you are starting out, how do you approach groups to present yourself as a speaker? Okay, how do you approach groups to present yourself as a speaker? Connie, there are so many answers to this. One is don't do it. What I mean is that let's think about this. Like, who is going to be, okay, let's just back up. Let me ask you a few questions. And I want to see answers. Jason asks, you know what, Kelsey, I don't know the answer to this. The offer we made to people in the email funnel when they registered for the masterclass and it offered them S3 at a deep discount? Can they still do that? Can you post the link so they don't have to go look for the email?
Yeah, we can take care of that.
Thank you very much. They'll send it through to you guys. They'll make it super easy. So anyway, going back to this, Connie, here's my questions for you. The one is, what is easier, selling yourself or selling someone else? What's easier? Put your comments in the chat. Pamela says selling Lucas. That's it. Now Pamela wants to be Lucas's pimp. I see what's going on. I see. All right. So it seems like most people are saying, hey, selling someone else, that's easier. Okay. So I think that there's a clue in that. By the way, this is one of the reasons that I'm a really big fan of BNI, the Business Networking International, because it's a business network all about selling the other members so that they can sell you. So there's a good clue. So now here's another question for you. What is more effective, selling yourself or being sold by someone else? Being sold, right? It just is. And so, Connie, when you ask what's the best way to approach groups to present yourself as a speaker, I would say not to. I would say don't approach groups to present yourself as a speaker. I would say get someone else to do that. I've done that routinely. Some of you may, over the years, have met Roland, who is on our team. Roland was initially was our promoter in Estonia, and we just developed such a great friendship and business relationship that he actually joined our team and does a lot of business development work for us now, and he's absolutely brilliant. And you know what he and I do is we go out to networking events and we do this for each other. He goes, I say, hey, Roland, you know what? I want to go speak at that conference. He goes over to those people and talks to me about as a speaker. So, and I do the same thing for him. And so what I would suggest, Connie, is that you band together. And this is, you've got a group of people right here. We've got the Facebook group. For those of you who are coming to the Speak Academy, you're going to form incredibly tight bonds with people, and they're going to see you speak for a week. So they're going to know a lot about you, and it's going to be easier for them to sell you. And this is the way you get yourself out there. I'll tell you where I learned this, by the way. I learned this watching Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer in the 90s. I mean, these guys, okay, by the 90s, they were already both very well known. But I'll tell you something. Whenever you saw one of them, speaking or telling a story, they were very often mentioning each other in their stories. I remember this story where it's like Wayne Dyer he says, I was having a really stressful time, and I was struggling to sleep, and I felt like the best thing I could do is I could call my friend Deepak. And so I picked up the phone and I called Deepak and I said, Deepak, I'm really struggling. And Deepak simply said, meditate. And I go, yeah, Deepak, it's Wayne. I know about meditating. I don't, right now I just want to talk to you. Meditate. Okay, Deepak, I know about meditate. It's Wayne Dyer. I'm aware. I've written books. I feel meditate and call me back. And so, Wayne tells this story just like that with the accent. Oh, it's so cute. But you see what they're doing is they're building each other up. And that's what I want you guys to do for each other. And that's what I want for our Speaking Academy clients to do for each other is build each other up. So Connie, I hope that answers your question. Marion McCool. Oh, come on, Marion, is that your real, if that's your real name, I'm telling you, that worked out well, didn't it? So that's a great name. So, hey, Marion, you're here with us. So your question is, I almost stopped breathing mid-presentation. Is it okay to stop for a drink of water, and how long should the pause be? Well, okay, Marion, I want to give you some funny math. Okay, if you're talking to somebody one-on-one and you pause for effect for 2 seconds, it feels like 2 seconds because you just feel it through the other person, right? But if you're talking to 10 people and you pause for effect for 2 seconds, somehow there's a weird thing that happens where now that 2 seconds feels like 20 seconds. Does this make sense? So silence on stage is magnified by the size of the audience in appearance. It's like a weird spin on Einstein's relativity. The experience of your time during that silence is going to be affected by the amount of observation. But it's not true. It's only true for you. It's not true for them. And so what I really want you to know is that audiences really like a bit of silence. They really like it because it gives them the opportunity to re-listen to what you've said and let it sink in. They really like it because sometimes, come on, how many of you have ever been to a comedian or you've been to see a speaker and they've said something quite funny and you're having a good laugh? Not the kind of laugh where you're allowing yourself to laugh, the kind of laugh where you can't help it. You know the difference, right? And so you can't help it, but then the speaker starts speaking before your laughing is done, right? It's kind of like somebody, you know, there's another bodily function that can be a bit like that, where you're really kind of getting into it, but somebody can interrupt it, you know, before it's finished. I'm talking about sneezing. I don't know what you were thinking. I was talking about sneezing, but the point being is that when the person doesn't leave the gap for the audience, then the audience feels unsatisfied that they didn't get to finish having their laugh. Well, it's the same with a lot of emotions they're having when you're speaking. So leaving pauses is actually really, really valuable. And almost always when somebody has that feeling of that I'm not breathing, it's just that they've gotten so sensitive to leaving silence that they don't want to leave any silence at all. And so what they end up doing is just speaking in these incredible long run-on sentences and not taking any time to breathe. And what happens is that they start to feel quite stressed about it. So does the audience, by the way. And then they can't figure out why it is that they're starting to feel dizzy in the head. And then they wonder why the audience is also dizzy. By the way, who has ever seen that happen on stage? Anybody seen that before? Absolutely. And so, Marion, you know what you do? You walk over and get a drink of water. Just like you said, it's totally acceptable. It's totally, in fact, a very good friend of mine was speaking in front of about 3,000 people just a few days ago. And I was there and I saw that they put his water under the podium, and I want the water up high because I drink a lot of water when I'm on stage. You got to drink a lot of water when you're on stage. You use a lot of water to talk, so you got to drink. And they put his water down low. And after about 15 minutes into his talk, he hadn't drunk any water, and I started feeling stressed out. Right? I started feeling stressed out about it. So yes, Marion, it's totally okay to go to drink of water, and it's totally okay to take a moment and take a nice deep breath. And yes, absolutely. Cool. Let's see here. Next question is Joanne. Will we leave the academy ready to... Joanne? Absolutely, without question. Joanne saying, will we leave the academy ready and able to tell our story? Joanne? Absolutely, and without question. I have had clients that come to us that are unable to even find stories in their life. And 5 days later, they're telling stories proficiently, effectively, and enjoying the process. I've had people come to me that they had stories, but that they were so nervous of telling them that putting a microphone in their hand would make them cry. And by the end of the 5 days, they're walking up on stage and they're telling the story effectively, easily, and with a sense of enjoyment. And I've had unbelievably high-level professional speakers who were telling okay stories before come out at the end of the 5 days telling deep, proper stories that keep the audience on the end of their chair and stop the audience from looking at Facebook. Joanne, without question, you will come out of the 5 days proficiently, effectively, comfortably telling stories. By the way, I've got a couple clients that have been through Speaking Academy. If you agree or disagree with what I've said, please write a comment in there. Just, you know, and I mean it. If you disagree, call me out. because, I'd like to know. There you go. Joanne, I'm pretty sure you're taken care of. And yes, I'll see you in Calgary. It's going to be a blast. And we'll be indoors for most of it. So that's excellent because it's Calgary and it's winter. Do you know, Joanne, people choose to live there? I'm amazed by that. I understand that people are born there and they don't know any different, but people move there. I'm kidding. Calgary is a beautiful place to live. I'm just winding Kelsey up. It's a lot of fun. All right. Marcus, thank you. Janine, thank you. And all of you who comment on that, thank you very much. All right. Yes, Joanne, you know how I feel about the DR. It's a good decision. Alex, what is the best strategy to not go blank on stage? Well, Alex, this is a tough one, but here's my answer for you. The best strategy for not going blank on stage is to stop being frightened of going blank on stage. I know, but you see, what causes people to go blank on stage is that they're frightened of going blank on stage. And so it's a weird twist, right? It's a bit of a problem. And so let me give you a couple of hacks that can help you to not go blank on stage. The one, DJ, meditate. That'll help. So, all right. That said, here's a couple of hacks. One is, I like using speech maps. And one of the things that I think you can do is you can take your speech map and just tape it down onto the stage at your feet. Now, I've done this many, many times, but I can tell you that if I've done it a couple hundred times, I've looked at that map maybe 2 times. I know that it's just a security blanket. That's all it ever is. If I'm going to be on stage doing a talk I've never really done before, and I just want to keep myself on point, I might put it on the stage or on the podium. And then in the end, I never end up looking at it. It's just a security blanket. That's all. The other hack that's a lot of fun, and Lucas, Marcus, Janine, a couple of others that have been on the program, you'll know about this, is that sometimes in the middle of a talk, I'll just go, hey, sorry, where was I going with that? And then I get the audience to go, oh, you were telling the story about this and this and this. And then I'll do that a few times. And then at one point, I'll finally ask the audience, how many times do you think I actually went blank? And they're like, you went blank 3 times. And I go, nope, I did not. I did it on purpose. I did it on purpose for a number of reasons. The one is that it creates audience stimulation. The other one is it tells the audience, oh my God, we better pay attention because he's not. And it keeps them paying more attention. It makes it feel more genuine and real. And the other one is because if I do go blank, I am 100% comfortable to stop in my tracks and ask the audience to help me out. And it has happened to me. It's happened to me on stage where I've gotten sidetracked. Somebody's asked a weird question that was off topic and I've lost my train of thought. It has absolutely happened to me. But here's the kicker. If you go to one of my programs say in the space of 5 days, it happens to me 5 times, I would then to ask you how many times did it happen? It's not 5 times. And you will not know how many times within the 5 were real, because I'm using that as a system for keeping engagement with the audience. Once you've done it, and listen, please, Alex, try it out one time when you haven't lost your way. Just act like you've lost your way, ask the audience to help you out, and do that once, twice, 3 times. And by the time you've done it the 2nd or 3rd time, you will now realize it's totally safe to lose track of your mind. And then you won't be nervous about it anymore. And then oddly, it won't happen so often. So great question, Alex. Awesome stuff. Teresa, is this course for somebody who's going into coaching? Teresa, without question. Look. How many of you guys have done WildFit? How many of you are WildFit clients? How many of you that have done WildFit would agree that it is like not just a little bit, but like substantially more effective than any diet coaching type program that is out there in the world? How many would agree with that? It looks like 100%. Let me tell you why. Because I'm good at presenting. It's because of the way I tell stories. It's because of my empathy with the audience. There's something about the way we've structured that program. And by the way, the same thing is why my live events have unbelievably high customer service ratings and high effectiveness, because it is not simply that yes, partially I've created good curriculum and good content. That's true as well. But the delivery is every bit as important as the quality of the content inside. And so, learning really effective storytelling, really effective presentation structure, really effective course structure, all things that we'll talk about. For somebody who's in coaching, there's no question. Look, Look, Teresa, it's particularly good for people in coaching, but let me put it another way. It's particularly good for people who are alive. And I mean that. I don't care if you're a parent or a manager of a business or an employee looking to get pay rises, or you're trying to raise money for your company, or you're being pulled over by the police. Effective communication is the difference between an outstanding life and a not outstanding life. I'm going to give you two examples. In the book Outliers, I think it is, in Malcolm Gladwell, he talks in one section about intelligence and the idea that they used to feel that intelligence would make the difference in the quality of somebody's life. So if somebody was smarter, they would automatically live a higher quality of life. And so there were some studies done on this. Anyway, at the end of the whole chapter, what Malcolm's talking about is that he identifies two people. One guy is truly, from an IQ perspective, one of the smartest people ever to live. He has an IQ that is something like 15 points higher than Einstein. He's alive in America today. He's considered to be maybe the smartest man that's ever lived. He lives in a trailer park. Why? And then, on the other hand, we've got Oppenheimer, the famous scientist who helped develop the atomic bomb. Now, here's some interesting things about the two of them. The one who's living in a trailer park today, well, at one point his car broke down, and so he couldn't get to school in the morning for his classes. So he contacted the registrar's office, and he asked them if they could move him to the afternoon classes so he could take public transport. And they said no, so he dropped out of school. He just gave up. His inability to communicate and his lack of determination ended whatever he was going to do there. Oppenheimer, on the other hand, at one point got so frustrated with one of his professors that he poisoned an apple and left the apple on the teacher's desk in an attempt to kill the teacher. And then when he got busted, he managed to talk him way out of getting expelled. He managed to talk himself out of criminal prosecution, and he managed to continue his education. I'm going to put to you that he was probably a hell of a communicator. And on a fun little personal note, my mom and I and some clients were driving in Zanzibar one day, and Elise. So me and Elise, my mom, and some clients were driving in Zanzibar. And it's Africa hot. I'm not wearing a shirt. And the police pull us over, and they're like, excuse me, sir, you're going to have to step out of the vehicle. We have to give you a ticket. And I'm like, what for? I wasn't speeding on it. You're not wearing a shirt. I'm like, it's Africa. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, I drive all over the place without my shirt. This is a Muslim country, which is incidentally not true, but Zanzibar is quite Muslim. So I guess if they want to call it that. And he goes, and we have different laws here. Again, I don't believe this is true, but I agree to get out of the car. I get out of the car and I go into the police station. The police station, incidentally, must have been built in the days of Tanganyika when Tanzania was under German rule, because it looked like one of those buildings that you would expect the Germans of that time to build. And I walked into this room and it had a light. You know the light that I'm talking about, the one they shine in your face? And it's like, we're face of making you give us all of the answers we are looking for. You know, that light. And they had that light in the room. And so they shine this light on me, and he's giving me all this grief about, you know, you should have had your shirt on. And pretty soon I realized all they're trying to do is get a bribe out of me. They don't want to write me a ticket. They just want me to give them a couple of bucks. I don't bribe police officers, so I'm not going to do that. Meanwhile, out in the car, my clients turn to my mom and they're like, this is really scary. I mean, you see the policeman with his big uniform, and they just took Eric into that scary looking building. Are you worried for Eric? And my mom, this is my mom. She's so funny. She goes, no, I'm worried about that poor policeman. And I kid you not, about 2 minutes later, Kelsey, that's funny. About 2 minutes later, I walk out of the police station, and the policeman opens the car door for me, lets me in, and then he goes, okay, now, if you want to get to the Spice Market, you got to go down there and turn left, and then you're going to get, and gave me directions to the Spice Market, no bribe paid. So my answer to you is becoming comfortable with your thoughts as words, becoming comfortable with your communication is it is maybe the most valuable life skill that exists on earth, whether you are a coach, a teacher, a lawyer, a doctor, or anything. So that is your answer, Teresa, and everyone else. And no, Kelsey, I don't know if you guys saw that. Kelsey goes, could I please record the entire WildFit program in my German accent? I don't think I'll be doing that. But Kelsey, feel free to check with Yvonne if she would like to do the WildFit in Germany like that. I'm happy to give that a go. So let's see. DJ. Hello. Are you there live? I don't see you. Oh, are you camera hiding? Because I thought I saw your camera. No, I'm not answering your question with no camera. Not doing it. Oh, come on. All right, I'll answer your question. I'll answer the question. Come on, where does that come from? People who have been at Speaking, I'll answer the question. All right, that's a little inside joke for Speaking Academy people. All right, DJ's question is, do you have a specific ritual you do before going on stage to get to ground you and get you in the zone? Yes, I'll discuss some stuff around that, and then I want to let you know that that is something that we will help you develop and train into you one day when you come out to the Speaking Academy. It's a big part of what we do, but I'll give you my short version. First thing is that my ritual does not begin right before I go on stage. My ritual begins the night before, because one of the key aspects of becoming a great presenter is sleeping well. And so what that means is not drinking alcohol a great deal the night before. Now, that's quite easy for me because I haven't had alcohol since 1991, so I'm not likely to knock back a couple of tequilas the night before. But the point is, I've seen speakers quite often go out and have like 2 glasses of wine, and I'm thinking to myself, that's insane. How many of you, by the way, have noticed that, like, look, a glass of wine or 2, by the way, I have no judgment about it. My wife drinks champagne or Prosecco every now and again. I have no judgment about it. I'm just saying to you, how many of you have noticed that 1 glass of wine can affect your performance the next day? How many of you have noticed that? So why on earth would you do that before you know you're going on stage the next day? You just don't. You just don't do that. Not if you're a professional. I mean, look, if you're a professional sports person, would you drink a glass of wine the day before the big match? Absolutely not. And that's how I view walking on stage. So the first thing is to make sure you're eating really well, a good meal, no electronics, go to bed, have a really good sleep. There's an exercise that I do before I go to sleep. This is bonus content. I don't generally teach this on webinars, but I'll teach it to you anyway. It's a really silly exercise that's born out of Hawaiian huna. And in Hawaiian huna, there's a really cool meditation they do. I don't know if visualization is probably a better word. And the way it works is, like, let's say you've got somebody in your life that you've kind of had a bit of a disturbance with. And so they believe that you have this connection to everybody you've ever had a connection with. I think they call it the aka connection. And so in huna, there's this visualization you do where you go inside and you feel through the top of your head the aka connection you have with the other people, with the other person. And then in your visualization, you snip the connection. And I'll tell you, the first time I did this, I was actually in Hawaii, and I did this exercise with a woman that was in my life, and she was kind of like a stepmother to me. And she and I had just gone through some difficulty, and we'd never had that before, and I didn't understand it. And we hadn't spoken in months, and I did this meditation, and I snipped the aka connection, and I kid you not, she called me the next day. It was just the weirdest thing. It's like when she felt our spiritual connection broken, she actually felt compelled to call me. Now, I know that some of you are going, all right, Eric, we usually like how logical and grounded you are, but that's crossing. You're now expecting me to light incense and hold up my crystals. I know, but I'm telling you that whether these things have a spiritual reality or they simply help internally, doesn't really matter. If they make you feel good, they're good. Does that make sense? Matter of fact, while we're here, I will light some incense and show you my crystals. I don't have any here, but I'm wearing crystals. That's good enough. I'm going to tell you an absolutely crazy story. And it's one of these stories that I don't even believe it, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway. And that is that I was running my first company, and I had scored a meeting with a very, very senior executive at a publicly traded company in order to potentially negotiate a huge contract. And this was in England. So what do we probably know about this really senior director of an publicly traded English company? What can we guess about his personality maybe a little bit? Like, do you think he's really warm, expressive, communicative? Do you think? Or is he probably, yeah, there's a lot of different ways we could say it, right? So anyway, I did a meditation where I went out and I did a meditation that I now do before I go on stage at events. And it's called a pre-meeting, where effectively I am creating an aka connection with them in advance of the meeting. So I'm kid you not, I did this meeting. The company I was going to see, some of you, if you're from Britain or you've been to Britain, you'll know Debenhams, a major prestigious, like high-end department store. And I did my meditation, and I went off and I created my pre-meeting with this director. And in the meeting, I said, listen, I know that I'm a tiny, small company compared to our competitors, but we're going to take really good care of you. And I just had a pre-meeting with him. Now, what I'm trying to say to you is it doesn't really matter whether that pre-meeting actually connects with him spiritually, if you believe that stuff, or if it simply made me feel better. It's a good exercise. Would you all agree with that? Yeah, if it simply makes me feel more comfortable when I walk in the room with him, then it was an exercise worth doing. But here's the absolutely crazy part. I really, especially if you're English, I want you to hear this. This is absolutely what happened. I arrived at Debenhams that morning. I went to reception. I signed in and got my visitor badge. I met my friend Peter, who was helping me win the account. He worked there. He took me up to the office, the conference room that we booked. And I walked into the office, and the director, Martin, who was there that I was meeting with, that I had never met before, when I went to hold out my hand to shake hands with him, he hugged me. Let me remind you that he's English. I mean, I don't know what happened. We could argue that I went out and had a pre-meeting with him and it created some spiritual connection, or we could argue that I simply had such a warm, relaxed energy about me that he felt that, that was appropriate. So I don't really care what created the result, whether it was physical or spiritual. I don't want to get into that debate. But the pre-meeting concept is really valuable. And so one of the things I recommend is that the night before you do a presentation, that you do a visualization where you go out and pre-meet the audience and you let them know that they're in safe hands, and you let them know that they're going to have fun during your presentation. You let them know that it's going to be engaging and awesome and stuff. And then you sleep on that. Does that make sense? All right. Now we could go a little deeper into that issue, DJ, around, additional. I'm going to keep calling you DJ, by the way. As long as you use your login name as DJ, I'm not going to call you Denise. It's just the way it is. Plus, you haven't turned on your camera, so I'm just in any event. So the next version of this is that in the morning, there's some things I like to do. I like to meditate in the bath. I just like to meditate in the bath. It's just my thing. And then in that meditation, what I want to do is visualize my talk going really, really well. And then what I want to do is put on the right playlist, right? Like the right music and oh, by the way, sorry, something I left out. I like to choose the clothes I'm going to wear the night before and set them out. In fact, for any of you who have been to our BFE or BFSA, I already know what I'm going to wear. Generally speaking, I already know what I'm going to wear on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. I chose that when I was packing, and I pretty much do the same thing at each BFE, BFSA, so I don't have that decision to make every morning. And it makes our filming continuity a little easier. So what I'm suggesting is set the clothes out the day before, then you get up, you have your nice, your nice meditation bath, you put on the right playlist that's going to get your blood pumping, and you get dressed and you head out. And then, of course, right before you're going on stage, you get into what we call speaker state. And that's a bigger conversation for another day. But that whole process grounds me and prepares me for going on stage. Great question. Cynthia, here you are. How do you deal with a situation where somebody asks you a question and you blank out or you get distracted by an interruption? How did you get back on track if you suddenly get stage fright? Well, Cynthia, I think the first thing is that you move to a place where you no longer can get sudden stage fright. What I mean is that your goal is to become confident that no matter what happens, you're safe and sound. That's really what your goal is, right? And one of the ways to do that is just with lots of experience and remembering never to let the audience know you're nervous. Because as we talked about during the masterclass, for those of you who were on the masterclass, I've said that I think it's a bad idea to let the audience know you're nervous, because that way, if you do let them know you're nervous, when they give you the feedback on how good your talk was, you won't believe them, because you'll think they were just giving you sympathy. So if you get a lot of practice and you don't announce your nervousness, then what you'll do is you'll create a sense of confidence that anything can happen. Now let's talk about what you do. Cynthia, if somebody asks you a question, this is the way you answer it if you don't know the answer. Are you ready? It's very important. You might want to write this down. I don't know. That's it. Now, that's a black belt, but if you want like a 2nd or 3rd degree black belt, and I'll tell you, the reason I say it's a black belt is because, frankly, I am amazed at the number of speakers that consider themselves to be professionals, and somebody asks them a question and they just make shit up. I'm blown away by that. I am blown away by the incongruency of it. I'm blown away about the credibility damaging nature of it. It blows me away. And so a black belt is getting your ego out of the way and saying, I don't know. Now, a 2nd degree black belt, I don't know, but I'll find out for you. Ooh, that's good. You know why? You guys tell me in the chat, which impresses you more? The speaker who knows the answer when you ask it, or the speaker admits they don't know the answer, and during the break they go get the answer and then come back and give it to you? Which one makes you remember that speaker more and gives them higher credibility? Done deal. The one who goes out and gets the answer, because it's easy if you know the answer, then you didn't really do much work. But if you went out and checked it out and got the answer, they're going to go, wow, I really like this person. So when somebody asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, you just go, I don't know. Or you say, I don't know, and I'll find out for you. And if you're at a talk where you can't like put them on a break or something like that, like let's say you're doing a keynote, then you know what you should do? This is perfect. Oh, this is black belt 3rd degree. Are you guys ready for this? Who wants this one? I only see 3 people. Okay, all right, okay, a few more. Here's how it works. Check it out. Guys, if it's brilliant, let me know. I want to know what you think, because this just popped into my head. I don't know, but if you check with my Facebook or Instagram account tomorrow, I'll post the answer there. Come on now. Is that not genius? It's the softest way to attract followers. You know, I'll post an article about it on Facebook tomorrow, or on LinkedIn, or on Instagram, or on Twitter, or whatever the case, wherever you want to send their traffic, right? You go, I don't know, but I'll definitely post an answer for you on Twitter tomorrow. Awesome stuff. So what I'm getting at is that Cynthia, what happens then is that the more comfortable you get with saying, I don't know, then the less you panic about not knowing the answer, the less you become unfazable. And you really on stage want to be unfazable. Here's one of the skills you want to develop, is that you can use anything to your advantage. That's really what you want. You want to be able to use anything to your advantage. And you know, so there's a couple ways you can develop that skill. One is go to some improv classes. I highly recommend improv classes to all of our clients. Go to some improv classes. They will teach you. Improv is about going with the flow. I'll give you one of the rules of improv. One of the rules of improv is always accept the suggestion. So where improv dies is where somebody makes a joke at your expense and then you defend it or you say no to it. You know, it's like let's say you got Marcus here on the call, and Marcus makes some comment, and I go, "Oh yeah, Marcus, I remember you saying that to me the other morning during Pillow Talk," and then Marcus might want to be like, "Hey, what are you talking about, Pillow Talk?" And then, but what he wants to do is come up with a response that one-ups me. So he wants to use my response and spontaneously one-up me instead of trying to stop it. And so think about that when you're on stage. When something happens, you want to think, how is this to my advantage? Here's one of the best examples I've ever heard. So you've got Tony Robbins and his team booked a conference center. And obviously they didn't check it out properly because there was a massive train line right behind the conference center. And so every couple of hours, a massive train would go ripping by. Rumbling along, and they couldn't do the seminar. And so how 99% of speakers would respond to that is they'd have a freak out, they'd have a meltdown, they'd be yelling at their promoters. I mean, it would be all this problem. Now, I'm not saying that Tony didn't probably do some of that stuff at the break with his team in private, because that is a mistake. But what did he do with the audience? He goes, now, guys, what I want you to know is that the way we've planned this conference is that there's an energy train. There's this energy train, and it comes by every couple of hours. And the way it works is that when it comes by, it just brings a ton of energy. And so if you're the first one to hear it, that's your goal. Your goal is to be the first one to hear the energy train. And the minute you hear the energy train, I want you to jump up into your chair to level 1,000. And typical Tony Robbins stuff, right? So guess what happens? He's in the middle of teaching. Then somebody hears the train and they go, the train, the train. And it's like the Muppet Show in there. They're all going crazy, but they're all getting their energy raised up. And instead of it becoming a negative aspect of the program the whole time, it becomes now you ask people afterward, they go, what was your favorite thing about the program? Oh, the energy train. That was awesome. So the better you get at utilizing whatever happens, the stronger you're going to get. All right. Rosemary says, how does Eric, host the webinar and read the chat and kind of keep track of all of this stuff? You know, I can only tell you that there's two reasons. There's two aspects to that. There's three. One is I have a really good team. So what that means is that Caitlin and Kelsey and others on the team, that they'll spot stuff that I should see and they'll highlight it for me in a Skype chat or something like that every now and again. So it's not that I'm always seeing it in the chat. That's sometimes. Sometimes I am seeing it in the chat, and that's because usually when I'm in presenting mode, I'm in a peripheral awareness. I'm not heavily focused on one person, but I'm peripherally aware of my monitors the same way I am peripherally aware of an audience. So I will often freak out audiences where I'll be like looking over here where Lucas is sitting and talking to Lucas, but then I'll notice that, that Sharon is over here and she's got a confused look on her face about what I'm saying to Lucas. And without even looking to Sharon, I'll go, and you know what, Lucas, even as I'm explaining this right now, Sharon is confused. And then Sharon's sitting there going, how does he know that? Well, it's because I'm using this peripheral awareness where I'm absorbing the room more than I'm looking at any one person. And so when we're doing these live webinars, I'm basically doing the same thing. I've got a general awareness of the chat that's going on over here, the messages that are coming from the team, and so on. And then the third thing is practice. It's a matter of practice. And the more you do these things, the easier it becomes, the easier it gets to be super spontaneous and be able to pick that stuff up. So Rosemary, thank you for the question and the implied compliment. I appreciate it. Kelsey, I think that's all the pre-programmed questions, isn't it? It is. So let's go to some of the stuff that I did see popping up in the Janine. Yes. Janine, are you familiar with Lynne McTaggart by any chance? So you want to check out Lynne. Hang on a second here. Lynne wrote this book and some others, and she's quite an interesting person, and she is doing all kinds of interesting studies on the power of intention. So if you are a hardcore Newtonian scientist, you probably don't like Lynne a great deal, because Lynne's going to say stuff like, hey, would you guys I have 2 plants here, and I want you to send positive intention to this plant, but not to that one, and let's measure it for a few years and see what happens. She does some really interesting thought experiments, stuff like that. But of course, the idea is that there is from her perspective, that there is an interconnectedness of us. And my point is, whether or not we have this interconnected thing, like, let's remember that we are all stardust. We are all stardust, right? And so on some level, we are all connected. But whether we are spiritually connected or not, the visualization stuff that I was talking about works. So it doesn't matter. That's kind of the way I look at it. But anyway, yeah, I'm always keen to learn more about those theories and those ideas. So good comment. Let's see. Marcus, 2 questions. I held a 2-hour talk, or rather a teaching, and didn't have a story for each point or information. So I used a list of the information points to be sure that I put them all in. How do you do it when teaching? And 2, how do you weave your inceptive stuff into the speech map with such long talks? Okay, so Marcus, one of the, so think of 3 basic models. You can tell a story to make a point, right? Clearly. Or you can make a point and then tell a story to prove that point, or to underline or underscore the point. Does that make sense? But then the other thing that you can do is that you can tell a story that has multiple points built into it. And so some of you, if you've ever seen me speaking about public speaking live, there's a story I tell about my father asking me to do a presentation at an AA meeting with him. He was having an AA birthday and he wanted me to come and give him his cake. I'm not going to tell the whole story now. If you come to the Speaking Academy, you'll hear it and it's hilarious and you'll love it. But I'll give you a basic idea of the way it works. I tell the story, but every now and again, I'll just break the story. I'll stop in the middle of it and I'll tell the point that that part of the story was about. So here's an example. My father, he just kept persisting and kept telling me that I got to come and do this presentation. And I absolutely didn't want to do it. I told him I'm not even allowed to speak at an AA meeting. I mean, I'm not a member of AA, so I can't be there. Because guys, isn't it true that when you're really terrified about something, you'll always come up with a really good logical reason not to do it? So you see what I've done is I was telling the story and then I dropped out of the story to make the point that the story was making. And then I carry on and I get to another part of the story and I go, and it was so terrifying. I'm standing up there on stage. I am so terrified that I'm kind of concerned I'm going to vomit. And the other problem is that at an AA meeting, you're supposed to say, hi, my name's Eric and I'm an alcoholic. And then they're all going to go, hi, Eric. And I'm not an alcoholic, so I can't start that way. And I'm freaking out. And then suddenly I think about Perry Mason and I think about those courtroom dramas that I grew up watching on TV. And I stood there on the stage and I said, hi, my name is Eric and my father's an alcoholic. And everybody in the room busted out laughing, including my father. And I suddenly felt better. Because isn't it true, guys, that when you can trigger a bit of a giggle or a bit of a laugh at the beginning of your presentation, it immediately settles your nerves? So you see what I'm doing is I'm telling a story to make the point and then dropping the point in. Telling the story to make the point and then dropping the point in. And you know, it's funny, I joined a mastermind called Genius Network, and I did a talk at Genius Network, and it's called a 10-minute talk, and I basically told that story with all the points in it. And then one of the members, a number of them, but one in particular said something really poignant to me. He came up to me and he goes, I've been a member here for 5 years, and that is by far and away the most entertaining and most valuable talk that I've seen here because of the way it was delivered. And the joke is it was just a story with points inside it. So in your case, Marcus, what I'd be looking to do is to try to figure out a way that you can find a story that lets you make many of those points. Or that when you're making a point, you're able to tell a story about that point. So can you give me one example of a point that you would like to be able to make, or a teaching point that you need to make? Can you give me one? Somebody unmute Marcus. I've done it.
Okay. Well, it was about finding your prices as a freelancer. And
okay.
I had several things, you know, that you have to convey the value and how you can do that, and that you need to know your target audience. So it went towards marketing.
Okay, but just give me one lesson that you want to teach. What's the one fact that you want them to retain?
Well, one thing was you need to get your happy price. You need to feel good with your pricing, because otherwise it will, affect your work.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what you would do is you'd say, now, one of the really interesting things that comes up for people that are in freelancing is setting their price. And you know, the crazy thing is that the price, sometimes it's really just a made up number. And the truth is that the right price is the price the customer is willing to pay. But I learned another really important lesson about this, because, you know, people are always saying, you should just raise your prices. You should raise your prices. And I found something really fascinating, because once I tried to sell one of our services at a much higher price than we had before. And I found it difficult to sell at that price. As I began trying to sell it, I felt resistance to myself. And so one of the other things that I've learned is, yes, the price is what the client's willing to pay, but the price is also what I'm comfortable to sell. So you see how I've kind of just, you know, conveyed the emotion without even having to fully tell a story. I'm just going, there was a time when I did this and I felt this way. And they're going to remember my version of that a lot better than if I just said, remember, you need to be happy with the price you're charging. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. And then your second question was, how do you weave in your inceptive stuff into the speech map with such long talks? Well, you know, my view, Marcus, is the much tougher thing is weaving the inceptive stuff into the shorter talks. Because like the longer the talk is, the more leeway you have to offer information, statistics, details. But I'll give you one formula. And guys, some of you aren't like long-term clients of mine, so you don't know what I mean by inceptive stuff. So I'm sorry, I forgot. I need to explain. We teach something called Inception Marketing. You can find out more about it at inceptionmarketing.com. Inception Marketing is based on the idea that it's always more powerful if the client reaches the buying decision on their own rather than you pushing them there. And you know, this is the same with therapy, by the way. Therapy is much better when the client realizes their breakthrough rather than you giving it to them. And so when we talk about an inceptive story, we're talking about a story that helps a client realize their buying decision without you having to convince them. And so, Marcus, one of the things that I would suggest is this. If you're ever trying to figure out how to weave sort of inceptive content into a story, one of the things you want to think about is, how did I come to the thought process? How did I come to the realization that I wanted to try that new hobby or buy that new product or take that decision? What was my decision process? Because that is probably the story that you might want to tell. And how many of you have ever heard me tell the story about barefoot running shoes with the Bushmen? How many? A few of you, right? I'm not going to do it again now, and more than half of you have, but I'll tell the idea of it is that I had a real experience in my life where I went running with the Bushmen and my knee wasn't hurting, and it made me think about running, and that maybe the reason that my knee wasn't hurting is that I was modeling the way the Bushmen run. I was running the way they run so we could be quiet in the bush, and then my knee stopped hurting. So I started thinking, wow, my knee hurts when I run the one way, my knee doesn't hurt when I run the other way, and that made me start thinking about barefoot running shoes. So then I tried barefoot running shoes, and I've been running ever since, and my knee never hurts. But I tell that story as a long, entertaining trek through Africa. And at some point during the story, more than half of the audience will think to themselves, wow, I wonder if I should try a pair of those barefoot running shoes. Right? And that's inceptive. So Marcus, that's my answer for your 2 questions. Thanks so much. Good to see you.
Same here. By the way.
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know what happened with the barefoot stuff, but my son decided 5 months ago to go barefoot, and he's still doing it, and it's freezing now. So it's working.
I will tell you, I had a small barefoot running shoe problem recently. Elise and I went to New York last weekend, and we were on Manhattan Island, and suddenly, like, not much snow, like I want to say 6 inches. What is that? Probably 20 centimeters, something like that. And I would think, growing up in Eastern Canada, that's like, we laugh at 6 inches of snow. I mean, we don't even think about closing the schools down until there's like, a meter of snow on the ground, 4 feet. Then no, Manhattan Island came to a complete and utter stop. Like we had a friend with us and we needed to get her to the airport. And they were saying it was going to take 2 hours to get her off the island, because the traffic had come to such a stop. So in the end, I ended up having, and she had been doing some photography and stuff, so she had her camera equipment, and I ended up having to carry her camera equipment and her suitcase across Manhattan, 2 kilometers across Manhattan in the slush and snow to get to the train station. Then, because the train passes weren't working, I had to get on the train with her to make sure she had, she's from Europe and didn't understand New York, not that I do. And I rode 1 stop with her, and I found myself in Queens, and I got off the train, and the train didn't have a train going back, and now I'm all of a sudden in Queens, and there's 6 inches of snow on the ground, and I have to walk back an hour to Manhattan because there's no transport, and I was wearing barefoot running shoes. Man, my toes were cold. So barefoot running shoes, ill-advised in the snow, is my opinion. Anyway, Marcus, good to see you.
I tell you, same here. See you.
All right. Let's see. Raimonda, I hope I'm saying that right. Raimonda asks, hi, 5 days of training is hard, isn't it? Where are the limits of results and / a person's physical limits to cut short, not 2 or 3 days? The best way for me to answer that for you is this, that let me use our 5-day business school, because we have a 5-day business school program as well. And I've had clients that have done our 5-day business school that also did 2-year MBA programs, and that have come to us at the end of the 5-day business school, and they've walked up to me with this odd look on their face, and they've said, how is it possible that I have learned more useful, practical, powerful knowledge in just 5 days than I did in 2 years? How is that possible? And so what I want to put to you is that I believe that I have taken the ideal amount of content and experience and wrapped it into the minimum period of time for the maximum effective results. And in the case of the Speaking Academy, it's 5 days. And if you're asking if that's too much, then I'm going to suggest it might not be the right program for you, because it's not just 5 days. It's more than 10 hours a day for 5 days. It is intensive. It is hard work, but it absolutely works. So I know I'm not doing a great job of selling it when I say it to that way, but I don't want to understate it at all. And I'll tell you, there's one more aspect to it, and that is, look, there's things you're going to learn on the program. There's content you're going to learn, strategies you're going to learn, tools you're going to learn. But a big part of what's going to make the Speaking Academy absolutely magical for you is that it's going to make you fully comfortable with being yourself. The single biggest challenge that presenters have is authenticity, because the minute they try to be anything, they're being inauthentic. I say this and it's an unpopular thing, but if you'd like to really know why Donald Trump won, you can talk about electoral colleges and political landscapes and all this crap. But I'll tell you that ultimately, the reason he won, what would have made the difference, why I was on tour in Europe before he even was nominated for the Republican Party, and I told people he was going to win the election. And then I went on tour of Europe after the election, and the European clients that were at my seminars were annoyed with me because it was like, by making the prediction, I made it happen. I don't understand that. If it was that simple, believe me, I would have won a few lotteries by now. But the point is this, that what the reason I was predicting it is that he didn't use teleprompters. And so while he says the most disgusting, racist, misogynistic, and terrible things, he doesn't leave you wondering who he is. You know, like I have very intelligent, very influential friends that voted for him. And for the record, by the way, I might sound a little anti-Trump. I am. I don't like him. I met him personally. I don't like him. I didn't like Hillary either. So I'm not on either side. I think America was left with a very bad set of choices. That's my opinion. If you're a big Hillary fan, I apologize. If you're a big Donald fan, I apologize. They weren't my people. But the bigger thing is that what my very sharp, intelligent, influential friends tell me when I ask them, how could you possibly vote for Donald? They would say, you know what? I don't like everything he says, but I like that he's willing to say it and I don't have to guess what's on his mind. In other words, they like his authenticity. Now, I know that sounds crazy because we think of him in a bunch of different ways, but the fact is he is who he is. And the challenge is that Hillary, and very often candidates of the Democratic Party, are conditioned to become robotic, cardboard cutout versions of human beings. And as a consequence, they break their connection with the audience. Now, I'll give you another example that's maybe little less contentious because it's in the past now. But when Al Gore lost the election to Bush, he lost by a fraction, right? Well, I'll tell you why he lost. Because they turned him into a cardboard cutout. He had not one bone of authenticity in him when he was speaking. But if you meet him after, or you see him talking about an inconvenient truth in the environment, the guy is full of passion. The guy is full of warmth. If one moment of that had showed up in that election, he would have kicked Bush's butt. So what I'm saying is, one of the reasons that the program is 5 days is that in order to undo some of the social conditioning that we've gone through that's taught us to be quieter than we should be, louder than we should be, not to use big gestures or to speak a certain way. You know, women should be seen and not heard, or you should think before you speak. Come on, we've all had these things said to us in some way when we were kids. And in order to break some of that social conditioning, which makes us create a shell of inauthenticity in the way we present, then we need an intensive boot camp style structure to do it. And that's why it works. So if that's too much for you, I totally get it, but I just wanted to be clear why it is that way. Okay. Next one here is, what are the most common mistakes you see new speakers make when branding themselves? How would you avoid them? Yeah, we could do a whole webinar on this one question, Lucas. We really could. But let's stick with a couple of things. One is a tragic mistake that I've made and I continue to make, but I've decided that it's worth it to me to continue making it. And I highly recommend you do not try this, because I have defied the odds. And frankly, I think I've held myself back. I think that I would be a much bigger recognized speaker if I didn't make this mistake. And so I want you to hear me. Don't try to be all things to all people. One of the challenges I have is that I'm extremely well known in some areas as a gregarious, entertaining, influential, powerful, and empowering business speaker. I'm also known in other areas as being a really great marketing head and being able to tell great talks about marketing. And then, of course, I'm routinely asked to speak about speaking. So people know me as a person who speaks about storytelling and speaking. And then if that hasn't made things confusing enough, I really enjoy talking about nutritional anthropology and all the research that led up to the creation of WildFit. And then if that doesn't take you far enough, then you want to talk about the anthropological underpinnings of the way relationships work and the dynamics between men and women. I'll talk about that all day long. Oh, and then let's get into parenting. So the problem for me is I have such an unbelievably eclectic set of interests, and I'm lucky enough to have a weird mind for capturing data and storytelling, that what happens is I like to speak about all of those things, which means you would have a hard time pitching me if you were trying to sell me as a speaker. You know, what would you even say? Lucas, let's say some guy in Alberta saying, hey, we're looking for a really great speaker. How would you even position me? I know a guy, he can speak about anything. Nobody wants to hire that speaker. And so what I would suggest is that you start yourself off with a powerful niche, even a powerful single keynote presentation that you become unbelievably well known for. And then with an established following, then you can branch out. And I'll tell you what happened in my case. I observed this. I made this decision. And I made the decision I didn't want to be a health speaker because I made the observation that very often there are certain niches that once you've entered that niche, it's like a dead-end cul-de-sac and you're stuck there. You can't get out. John Gray, who wrote the Mars-Venus books, he is one of the most successful authors in the history of the printed word. But you know, the challenge is that that's all anybody wants to hear about now. Mars, Venus, Mars, Venus, Mars, Venus, right? Well, he has an incredible array of other things he talks about. He talks about parenting. He talks about different types of supplements, hormone imbalances. He has a variety of topics that he wants to talk about, but everybody wants, and I watched that and I thought, you know, I don't want that. And so I made a decision about 6 years ago that what I would do is become known as a business speaker, because I felt like an entrepreneur, a really well-known, recognized entrepreneur has the leeway to speak about anything in the end. Tim Ferriss can pretty much speak about anything. Richard Branson, if Richard Branson wrote a diet book, people would probably buy it, right? But if let's say, I don't know, what's a good diet book? If the Atkins guy, if he wrote a book on business, who's buying that? He wrote the Atkins book, right? But I felt like from business you could move. But the problem was, and we didn't anticipate this, was WildFit took off 3 years early. We weren't meaning for WildFit to do that. And so I was meant to be 5 years into being a relatively famous published author and speaker of business before WildFit launched. But then all of a sudden WildFit just took off like crazy. And so on one level, that's really awesome. But on another level, it's created brand confusion for me. And I know that that holds me back in some places. So what I would suggest to a new speaker starting out is pick a niche, stick with the niche until you have like minimum 100,000 followers on Instagram, you know, minimum that kind of level of followers where your followers are willing to go with you on another journey. Does that make sense? All right. Great question, Lucas. Let's see here. Joanna, how do you engage an audience that is in your training, not because they want to, because they have to? In my job, I have to train teams. I get it. All right. So listen, first of all, I'm super glad you're coming in January. I really, really am glad, because we're going to deal with this question pretty heavily there. But let's go to the question. Is what she's basically saying is, how do I engage members of the audience that don't want to be there? And I'm going to tell you that, Joanne, you're definitely going to be in the right place at the right time. The reason being is that in January at the Speaking Academy, you're going to learn about something called broad spectrum appeal. I believe I'm the only one teaching it quite the way we do. I've never seen it anywhere else. But broad spectrum appeal is a combination between a recognition of the way the audience is structured in terms of their listening patterns and the effective use of storytelling. And so one of the stories that you'll hear in more detail in January, I'll give you the light version of it now, is that pretty much if I am in a city and somebody asks me to come and speak to students or teachers, I don't charge for that. I'll go and do it as a pro bono exercise. Obviously, if I have to fly in for it, they have to cover expenses. But if I'm already in the city, I'll just show up and do it. And so I was in London, and these people asked me to come and speak at their school. So I show up at the school. And I confess that when I'm doing pro bono speaking, I might not put quite as much effort into it as when I'm speaking for a fee. I'm sorry. I've got a lot going on in my life, and if I'm doing a pro bono talk, I might just show up and wing it a little. I hope that this is okay. And so far, it's gone well. And so I show up and I'm going to wing it a little. So I walk into the school and I meet the headmistress and I go, so which class am I speaking for? And she goes, all of them. What? What do you mean all of them? She goes, yeah, all of them. I go, oh, is this a junior high school or a high school, or what kind of school is it? She goes, it's a K-12. So for those of you who come from different countries where you don't know what I'm talking about, K-12 means kindergarten to grade 12, which means there will be children of 4 and children of 19. And there are going to be like 200 of them. And I'm going to have to speak to them for like an hour. Like, good luck, right? So, and by the way, whatever scenario you were describing, I think we can agree mine might be a little more challenging in that situation, right? Children are difficult. But so what did I do? I used really powerful voice inflection. I recognized that some people are going to want a faster paced, louder presentation, and others are going to want more moments of soft, introspective thought. And then I recognized something else. two really important things. One is that all of them could relate to stories. And so storytelling is one of the most powerful tools in creating broad spectrum appeal, because my goal whenever I stand on a stage is to have 99% appeal, irrespective of why the audience was there. That's very important to me, because sometimes I'm invited to business conferences to speak about health. And so if I don't win the whole audience, I'm going to have a problem. And so I resorted to using storytelling and voice inflection and stuff to keep them all engaged. And then I did one other thing, and that was that I recognized what was common to them all. Because that's one of the things you want to figure out is what's common to them all. Like you've got to be able to find something that's common to the whole audience. And so I realized that at that time, the one thing that was probably common to all of them was Harry Potter. I mean, if you were 4 or 5 years old, you loved Harry Potter. If you were 8 or 9 years old, you loved Harry Potter. If you were 12 or 13, you liked Harry Potter. You might not have been so vocal about it, but you did like it. And if you were 18 or 19, you still loved Harry Potter, but you hid it from everybody. And if you were 21 or 22, you definitely hid it from people, but you were still reading the books just inside a brown paper bag. And if you were 26, 27, then you were back to loving Harry Potter and not caring what people thought. My wife and I lined up at a bookstore and got the very first copies of the final Harry Potter book at midnight when they went on sale. And did we buy just one book so we could share? Hell no. We wanted to read it at the same time. We bought 2. Okay. So everybody loved Harry Potter back then. And so what I did is I made sure that some of the stories I told, I used Harry Potter metaphors. And so I was able to maintain their connection. So what you're looking for is you want to use the right animation and voice tones. You want to use storytelling, and you want to try to find the things that might be common for the entire audience. And don't worry, in January, we'll go much deeper into your question and get you some even better answers. Okay, next one here is, how do you engage? Oh, no, I got that one already. Let's see. About emotions. If you have a story that still makes you cry, like the overnight sudden cardiac death of my brother, how can you tell that story with emotion, but without having that emotion interrupt your flow? Nicola, it's not the emotion that interrupts our flow. It's the resistance of the emotion that interrupts our flow. Here's a lesson I'd love all of you guys to get, and this is bonus content. This is not normally part of, I don't talk about this really in this, but we have our, once a year, my wife and I run a really amazing life planning retreat. So, we bring a small group of people to our home here in Cabarete, and we spend a week with them creating a design life, figuring out what's next. And let me tell you that when you work on that kind of stuff with people, you begin to realize that all people really want is certain feelings. Everything you want is to access a feeling. If you want a Tesla, it's because it's going to make you feel a certain way. If you want sex with that person over there, it's because it's going to make you feel a certain way. If you want a Kit Kat bar, it's because it's going to make you feel a certain way. Does this make sense to everybody? And so one of the problems with this is that sometimes, here's a funny thing. If you create a list of emotions, can you divide a list of emotions up into good and bad? Can you do that? So give me some examples of good emotions in the chat. Some good emotions. Happiness, exultance, happy, happy, love, joy, joy, joy. I feel like we're at a Abraham Hicks concert. Happy, 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 joy, joy, joy. All right, so now give me some bad emotions. Some bad emotions. Hate, anger, sad, resentment. Oh, Joanna says none. Interesting. Anger, pessimism. Okay, resentment. So I want to tell you that I think Joanna's onto something. I don't think there is a bad emotion out there. I think that the emotions are just emotions. So I'm going to give you an example. Shame. Shame is an emotion that can definitely hold people back. Is it true? I mean, I'll tell you something. Let's use a really like very visceral example. Can shame, guys, we're all adults here. Can we do this? Can we do a little adult conversation? Can shame hold people back from having an unbelievably pleasurable sex life? Can it? Yeah, it totally can. I am amazed at the depth to which shame can hold people back from that beautiful expression of affection and love and friendship and all the stuff that can be involved in it. And yet shame can hold us back. But hang on a second. Is shame a bad thing? Well, let me ask you the other version. Have any of you have ever had a friend or done business with somebody who had no shame at all? Because when they have no shame at all, frankly, they're assholes. Sorry, I'm sorry to be blunt, but somebody who has no shame at all, doesn't have any shame about lying, exaggerating, not keeping their promises. And so what I would suggest to you is that shame is not good or bad. The way I look at all emotions, this is a new thing I've been working on, but I just want you to play with me and see if it works for you. I look at emotions as these beautiful horses. And if you don't break the horse, if you don't climb up onto that horse's back and wrest control over it, then the emotion can trample you. But if you can climb up onto the back of that emotion and ride it, then that emotion can make you a better, faster, more effective human being in every possible way. And so shame makes you better. And I'm going to give you this. I haven't shared this story publicly ever, I don't think. I might have. No, I shared it with a small group of people last week at a conference. But I had something happen to me recently where I was having a business conversation with a very key person in my business life. And I realized that I was annoyed at a decision they'd made because they didn't make the decision in my favor. And I thought we'd had a slightly different agreement than that. But I realized we really didn't have that agreement. It was my assumption. But in the moment, I was annoyed. And I wrote a response back that basically said, well, that's fine, but it's a very big inconvenience to me because of this, 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 and this. And then that night, I felt shame come up. I felt shame come up inside me because I realized that it was my stuff, that it was my assumption that had led to me wanting it to be a certain way, and that ultimately I was trying to put a guilt trip on them by saying, well, you caused these difficulties in my life. And I felt shame about that behavior. Now, what many of us would do is push that shame down, watch some TV, eat a chocolate bar, drink some alcohol, put the shame down. But not me. I went into the shame all the way. I just dove into it. I felt awful. I felt like a terrible human being. And then I picked up my computer and I wrote to them and I said, guys, I'm a dick. I'm sorry. If I really think about it, this was my assumption. It's not your thing. And I apologize. And you know what's really fascinating about that? It improves my relationship with them because they're like, you know what, this guy is just for real. Like, we didn't like the email he sent, but wow, this is for real. But the other thing is that it's unlikely that I'll repeat that behavior because I wrote the letter of apology. So what I want to put to you is that these emotions, none of them are bad, and that every one of them simply wants to express. And so when you are feeling like an emotion might get in the way on stage, it's because you're trying to resist it and get away from it. And so what happens many times when somebody's telling an emotional story on stage is that they don't really know. You see, look, here's a funny thing. This is a funny little gag that I do, but how many of you have noticed that like men don't typically cry as often as women? Has anybody noticed this? Anybody? Yeah, okay. Does anybody want to know why? Why is it that men, typically, well, okay, I see the exceptions in the room, but typically men seem to cry a little less, right? So I want to tell you, here's why. I think we don't really cry for two reasons. The one is because the women in our life don't like it. Now, I know you say you like the vulnerability of it. I know, well, but it shows the vulnerability. Yeah. You tell me you're on a plane at 30,000 feet and severe turbulence start rocking the plane. Like major turbulence. People's drinks are flying around and then you look over and your husband is crying. How do you feel about that? Right? Not allowed. That is not allowed behavior. Right? So in some level, we've been conditioned that it's not okay for us. Now, the second reason that men don't cry is because we don't cry so often. When something bad enough happens that's actually going to make us cry, we feel as though it may never stop. Men, can any men relate to this that I'm talking about? Like, it's like, if I let this open, man, and so I think that when we're on stage, we all have a bit of that feeling. And so the trouble is when we're telling a deeply personal story that evokes emotion, we're a little bit afraid if we cross down below the line of emotional control that there's a technical term for this in the speaking world. It's called losing your shit. So you might just lose your shit, right? And so then you feel like, but what I'm saying to you is it's not that line of emotional control. It's the fear of the line of emotional control. And so one of the things, for those of you who are coming to Calgary or Oslo, one of the things you'll notice is that once somebody has hit that line, they are now aware of where it is. And so they're able to tell the story and feel the emotion such that the audience can feel it, but without losing control. And so the key is just to be willing to risk losing control the first couple times and to know that the audience will only ever love you for it. And I'll share a funny little story that John Gray shared with me once. And how many of you are familiar with Barbara DeAngelis? Does anybody know Barbara DeAngelis' work? So you might be familiar with Barbara, and you might not be. Barbara is also an author in the relationship space. And she and John used to be married. A lot of people don't know that. So she and John Gray used to be married, and they were running relationship retreats. And so they had a big relationship seminar, big relationship retreat. And that morning they got up, and in their hotel room, they had a major fight, like a massive fight. And she left him. She's like, I want a divorce. There are 200 people in the seminar room waiting for the two of them to come and lead a relationship retreat. And his marriage just failed. And yes, really. And he walked out. I have to admit, I'm telling this story. He told it to me firsthand. This is not like I heard him telling this at a seminar. He's a friend of mine. He told me firsthand. I admit my memory might be a little off. It might not have been 200 people, blah, blah, blah. But generally speaking, yes, the facts are correct. And so he walks out onto the stage and he sits in the chair and he goes, well, guys, this is going to be a bit of a different experience because I have to admit that this morning, Barbara and I had another really big fight and Barbara left me. And then he cried. And do you know what they did? They cried. And then everybody cried. And it ended up being the best relationship retreat in the history of relationship retreats. And so don't be afraid of your emotions on stage. Let them come out, feel where they are, and it will just get better and better and better and better. So, wow, guys, this has been a lot of fun. I got to all the actual questions. I think there might be a few more here. I think I've got to them, but there's a couple things I want to just drop into you guys. The couple things. The one is, for those of you who are not yet, look, the people that are on this call are in like kind of 4 categories. There's people who are already registered. Sorry, 5 categories. There are people who have already been to the Speaking Academy. By the way, for those of you who have already been, I have no idea where the team is with leaders. So if you're interested in being a leader, you should always reach out to our team and say, hey, I'd love to be a leader at the program, because we only ever want our graduates to be leaders. So some of you are on the call that have been to the program. Some of you are on the call, you've already booked to be on the program. Some of you are on the call because you've just simply made the decision that it's not for you and you're not going to book, and that's absolutely fine. And then some of you are on the call and you're on the fence. So here's the thing. If you're on the fence, just do it. Just do it. It's backed by money back guarantee. I guarantee you're going to be absolutely thrilled you do it. So make sure you do that. And if you want some general guidance or help with determining whether it is a good idea for you, then make sure you book a discovery call with Ryan. I think I saw Ryan. Yeah, Ryan's on the call. Ryan, say hi to everybody. So book a discovery call with Ryan. Ryan has seen the program deployed in a number of different countries. He's seen many people go through it. And so he'll be able to not only help you figure out if it's a match for you, but he'll also be able to give you some general advice that we share in the program about you and your speaking career and how to take it forward. So book your time with Ryan. The link is in the chat, and then they'll post it down again here. There it is. And then let's see. And the other thing is, for those of you who are, not able to make it to the live dates or what have you, just keep an eye on stuff. We're toying with adding we're toying with adding a third event in 2019. There's a chance we're going to add a third event in. So if our current dates didn't work for you, there might be a third event coming. So just keep an eye on our website, or let the team know that you want to know the details, and we'll try and get you. Zohar says she tried to book this morning, but there was a problem with the system. So if you guys could get in touch with Zohar and sort her out. Seymour, the maybe location is not official at the moment, but Europe is all I'm willing to say at this point. If we do another one, it's going to be based in Europe, a very cool place in Europe. Sabina, I'm afraid not in the USA. The current immigration policies in the USA make it really difficult for me to run workshops in the USA. We are trying to fix that, but it's just gotten a little difficult to process those types of applications, and we're doing the best we can. That's why we do right now the North America programs we do in Canada, because I'm Canadian. Once we've sorted that out, we will start doing some programs in the US too, but that's probably 2 years away. So it is what it is. Seymour, if you guys are a couple, talk to Ryan. I don't believe we typically offer couples discounts for the Speaking Academy. The reason being is there's a limited number of seats. So like we do couples discounts for WildFit. It makes sense. We do couples discounts for the business freedom experience, but I don't think we typically do for Speaking Academy. But if we have places coming up like last minute, I suspect Ryan can do something for you. So Ryan, maybe get in touch with Seymour and see if you can work something out for them. And that's it. I think those are all the kind of logistical things. Kelsey, anything else you needed me to deal with? Anything else I needed to say?
No, that was great. Thanks, Eric.
You're welcome. Guys, that was so much, a lot of fun. For those of you who are watching on the recording, I'm sorry you couldn't make it live. It was a ton of fun. And we will do some more like these in the future. Here's the favor I would like to ask of you one way or the other. If you see us doing another masterclass on public speaking, help us overcome the public skepticism, because look, we're really clear. I'm going to show you that we have live events to go to, but I'm going to give you so much damn value that it was worth you being on the calls. And the problem is these days, there's so much fluff out there that when we announce one of these masterclasses, people just assume that it's yet another fluffy, pure hype sales pitch. And so the next time you see us advertising one, please like it, comment on it, share it, help us get the word out there. I would really personally appreciate it. Please prove to me that we can win by giving value at every level. Because what's annoying me right now is there's a guy, I'm not going to mention names, but I swear every event that I've heard of that he does is hype, 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 and then selling super high-end stuff, and it's bloody working. And it breaks my heart that it works. And so I would like you to help me prove that adding as much value as possible is actually the right way to do it, to win the long version of the game. That said, have a fantastic balance of your week. For those of you who are coming to Calgary and Oslo, I'm really looking forward to seeing you. Again, for those of you sitting on the fence, get over it. Just choose a side of the fence and get there. And thank you guys all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see everybody.